What do we do when holidays trigger trauma reactions? That's the topic we're going to be addressing today on Flourish-Meant. I'm your host, Tina Yeager. Today, I have an expert guest that I cannot wait to introduce you to. Her name is Dr. Barbara Lowe. She's a national speaker and author, a licensed psychologist, founder and owner of Greenleaf Psychological and Support Services, which is a large multi-site psychological practice and training center in Raleigh-Durham, North Carolina. She's also the visionary behind Dr. Barbara Ministries. She's a somatic experience practitioner, an EMDR practitioner, a master ART therapist, a board certified life coach, an educator, and an ordained minister. I don't know how you have time to rest, but I'm sure that you do. Being a life coach, you want to practice what you preach. So, Dr. Barbara, tell us a little bit about why trauma is something that's important to you and why it should be something we're aware of during the holiday season.
Well, holidays are, it's kind of like the basement parts of our heart come up because we're around our family again. And, a lot of us didn't really have this growing up. We have unmet needs. We have where trauma has pierced our safety in some way. And so I look at unmet needs and like where, true when we think about trauma piercing our safety. And those things tend to come up. And the reason why it's important to talk about this is because we all have unmet needs and traumas. For one, even just being in this world alone, we're born into a war. And as Christians, we know that there's an unseen enemy that's trying to twist things all the time. It's trying to kill, lie, and destroy. So we have trauma, even if we grow up in really good homes. It's a broken world. And I myself have had experienced a tremendous amount of trauma healing. And I have put a lot of my trauma healing method that I've developed over time into this book. And then the journal is really necessary to work through it as well. It's really pretty. We all have trauma. And at times, like when we're around family, the holidays, or it could be like everyday triggers, a certain boss or personality, we're triggered. And then we don't act Christianly, right? We act more out of our flesh, and this like reaction, defensive criticism comes out. Well, these are places where we have often those unhealed wounds, those unmet needs. It's actually a breeding ground, really, really for sin. And then I know that you focus a lot on nutrition, health, healthy eating, and boy, the emotional eating, which I'm not completely opposed to as long as I'm doing it mindfully, right? If I'm mindfully, like I'm eating chocolate mindfully and I know I'm emotionally eating and I'm okay with that. So, I'm okay with a little, some of that. But it's really when we get into those excesses is over where we have those unmet needs. The book is Healing Encounters with Jesus and Psychology, because these are really the pieces, the people, and mechanisms that have changed me and that I see changing lives day in, day out. And it's just so amazing.
Getting free is so important. And yet, during the holidays, sometimes those very things that we turn to for comfort or for celebration can be triggers to remind us of things in our past. Memories are triggered by smells and tastes and music, and all of those things are happening during the holidays. Plus, we're around people we may have had some past issues with, some conflict with, or that may remind us of times when we went through suffering and trauma. Can you talk about what to do when you're faced with those triggers that bring you immediately back to experiencing those emotional things once again, as if they were happening right now?
Yeah. So I'm going to back up just a minute and say, I talk about in the book a couple different stories of women driving home for the holidays and, the different felt sense that they have. Like maybe Tanya is expecting she's going to see her sister. She's going to watch her nieces and nephews play on the same carpet that she used to play with her sister. And just the smells and the sights and the sounds give her like the ooey gooeys, right? And then we have maybe Ashley, who maybe mother's an alcoholic and uncle had molested her when she was 4. And she's coming home. It's a completely different felt sense. She probably feels dissociated. She feels dread about coming home. She has ambiguous attachment. I want to come, I don't, I want, and that double bind. So what do we do? What do we do when we're triggered? Well, as Christians, we definitely want to turn toward the Lord. So for the people of faith who are listening, that is a real, live, active attachment, safe attachment that we have. And then we also want to develop what I call some self-momming skills or self-parenting skills, where and if we're a Christian, we can gain strength from the Lord, and we can begin to be that parent we never had, and to the age that the felt sense is coming up. Like if I'm feeling 7 again, I'm not going to be like, come on, girl, you got this. I'm going to be more like, sweet baby girl, it's okay. I'm with you. God loves you. I love you. And you are not alone. You were alone back then, but you are not alone anymore. And I would say the Heart Journey method takes us through safety and stability skills for the first 4 chapters. And then the next 4 chapters are those time reversing traumas and satisfying unmet needs skills. And then the last 4 chapters are more those integration, living a new way, relationship skills, forgiveness, and participating with God in redo activities, and then learning your life purpose and launching into it. I remember myself going through many holidays where I was kind of white knuckling it through because the pain was arising from my own childhood. And I would actually bring along something like this. There wasn't anything like this back then, but maybe like a devotional that was talk about how much God loves you and loved you back when you were a child. And I would just kind of cling to that because that would just help me get through. Now I had a lot of trauma. Yeah. So I would definitely recommend getting the book, doing it with a friend, with the journal, and inviting Jesus into those places.
So would you say it's important when you know you're walking into something that could trigger trauma to give yourself a backdoor, a place where you can give yourself a time to escape the constant trigger and have some time to process and heal and renew in the midst of that, especially if you're staying in the home of someone who was maybe not the offending parent, but someone who allowed things to happen and you still have some issues with that?
Yeah. Well, again, let's back up a little bit and just say you don't have to actually stay in the home. There's some negotiation. You can rent a car if you're flying there. You can get an Airbnb really close by so that you have abilities to set boundaries that are natural. You can have a work project that you're going to have to escape to work on a little bit while you're there. And you're so sorry, but you have to go to your Airbnb every night and just kind of do this thing. And so, we can tell the truth, but kind of schmooze it a little bit so that we can get our needs met. I love how Peter Levine, who created somatic experiencing, talks about that we have to feel the feelings of our life. We have to experience the experiences of our life. We hold within our body, we hold trauma, we hold these experiences. And, animals in the wild, they'll like even shake, literally to shake it off. They literally will let their nervous system discharge. But our higher cortex gets in the way and we kind of hold it in. And so we definitely need to turn in with the Lord if we know the Lord, and then be with our body sensations with curiosity and do some of this self-parenting work as well. This can be so powerful. There are a lot of more tools in here, but these are big tools. Like these are big fundamental tools that can be helpful. So yes, I do believe in boundaries and creating them and setting yourself up for success and bringing creature comforts, like I told you, the holidays, I would bring a book that would make me feel closer to the Lord, or a sensory item, or your favorite blanket, or your favorite jammies.
To talk to the people who don't understand how this fits with the Christian belief system. Sometimes as Christian believers, we'll see in certain church circles that they'll say, well, you don't need to look at the past. You're redeemed, just move forward and go on. This isn't really where we are navel staring, and those kinds of things that people will often say. How do you respond to that? And how do you help people who are still processing trauma respond to those who have those criticisms?
Well, what we've learned since 1994, 97 is that memories are not stable and that they can be unlocked and changed. And we used to think these kind of what people used to call neuroses, like these cycles that we get stuck in that we can't seem to get out of, maybe in authority or in relationships or with our mom or our sister, that we would be stuck. We now know that emotional learning can change, and it's called memory reconsolidation is the area of research that's molecular, post hoc clinical, and neurological researchers independently are discovering this. All right. So you're like, you asked me about the Bible. Why am I talking about this? Well, with the woman at the well, Jesus brought up her past out of the blue. And it appears to me that now I don't want to put Jesus in a box, like that's the last thing I want to do, but it does appear to me that maybe Jesus opened up her past for her to experience that healing and that memory reconciliation window. I mean, Jesus is a brilliant scientist. He knows all the science. He created it, and it's true science, right? It's not spun science. So Jesus himself brought up the pain of this woman the Samaritan woman, she was there in the middle of the day, probably trying to avoid people. She was a Samaritan, so she was an outcast to the Jewish people. She was a woman. And, rabbis used to say, thank God I'm not a dog or a woman, because the low status of women. And then women couldn't divorce, but yet she had been divorced 5 times. And so how did she get 5 certificates of divorce if women didn't have that power? So she likely was maybe infertile, or we don't know, but there was a lot of rejection. And that women, since women couldn't hold property, she was shacking up with someone. So I'm not saying that's okay, but there were circumstances going on. And so she was hurt. So when it sounds like almost Jesus went for the jugular, but he didn't. I believe he opened up her pain to give her a different experience with him. And she went from being an outcast to converting her whole town. And history, she's one of the early martyrs in Fox's Book of Martyrs, and she has been noted as being equivalent to the apostles. How does such a change happen? Jesus brought up her past and then ministered healing right there.
Yes, that's such a great story. And I love the way that he put some of the triggers out of that scene. He sent the men away, the rest of the disciples away, because he knew that she'd already been wounded by men, and he only wanted to meet with her personally in that moment of transformation. So I love that. So God is okay with us knowing where we are and what we need and what triggers we can handle and what our capacity is for that. So I'm sure that you go into that in your book as well. Mm-hmm. Can you talk about how people can stay connected with you and get a copy of this amazing new book that you have?
Yes. So it's pretty much online everywhere books are sold. So definitely go to Amazon and get the book and the journal, because the book leads you to the journal over and over. And look, I mean, if you're going to be working on trauma, let's do it in a beautiful way, right? And there are QR codes in there too, where you can get guided meditations using your holy imagination and encounters with Jesus with me. So Amazon and all the other places books are sold, it's on all the places. I have been focusing on my clinical practice for the last year or two and kind of put a pause on my ministry. I'm slowly relaunching it. And I've started a brand new Instagram account. So you're going to be like, why does she only have just a few followers? Well, it's because it's new. I went from drbarbaralowe.com to Dr. Barbara Ministries. So you can find me on Instagram and TikTok, and you can find me at drbarbarministries.org as well. And I do have an email list. I send out emails about once a month, and I have an email list of like 32,000 or something like that. So I'd be happy to get anyone on my email list. I have a few, if you go to my website, I have a few freebie mini books, and one on rejection and self-care and some others. So feel free to go there and once you download one, you'll get on my email list.
So in this second part of our conversation with the amazing psychological expert, Dr. Barbara Lowe, we're going to dive into more details about what to do when the holiday experiences trigger your trauma. Dr. Barbara, could you talk directly to that person out there who is really anticipating a trauma trigger to happen during this holiday season? Can you give them some steps and some practical things to put in place? We talked about a few in the first half of our conversation, but can you get into some more practical details?
Yeah. Well, in the beginning of Heart Journey and in the journal, I have you work through a couple there's about 26 safety and stability tools. And I actually have 109 to be coming in other books, but here we have these 26. And so I have, for example, the Mind Mansion tool, where you can imagine yourself going into your mind. And I love to bring Jesus with me. And you imagine your mind having billions of rooms. And so you can go anywhere you want. You're never trapped in a room. We kind of have these perseverative thoughts, worry, but we're not trapped there. And we can go to all these different places. Like we can go to France for for 30 seconds, or we can go to the Bahamas and we can bring Jesus there and use our holy imagination according to Philippians 4:8. So the Mind Mansion tools in the book, there's also the safe place tool that a lot of therapies use. And I integrate in Christian encounter with Jesus in safe place. There's also 4 square breathing, where you breathe in for 4, hold for 4, breathe out for 4, hold for 4, and you can draw little squares while you do it. If you're sitting at the dinner table with a pen, there is, I do a Christian relaxation, and with all the breathing tools in the book, we breathe in the ruach, the breath of God, and we breathe out the stress. And so all these tools are aimed at bringing us into more nervous system stability, because when we're triggered, we're in that fight or flight or freeze, collapse, or dissociation. And we want to bring ourselves back into that window of tolerance where it's manageable. It still might be painful, but it's manageable. Another skill is just grounding, finding a place in your body, knowing Jesus is with you, finding a place in your body that feels safe, and just identifying what's the color, what's the texture of that place. And then notice that Jesus is there inside your body with you. And then just sheerly from our indigenous Christian psychology, going into the Bible talks about when go into your inner room and pray, go into the bathroom and pray, and just I don't know about you, but I have the U Bible on my phone, and I'm just like, God, speak to me. I just need you, and just being with Him. We have all the disciplines that Richard Foster talks about that are traditional in Christianity. Worship changes the atmosphere, so we can also put on some worship. So we have our traditional Christian tools, and then we have science tools where we can also integrate in Christianity at the ground level, which is what Heart Journey does.
Would you describe how Heart Journey is different from other modalities that are out there?
Well, if you were to look at all the people I thank for their science in here, you would know that this is a very integrative approach. It incorporates a lot of science together. So it's not like acceptance and commitment therapy or CBT or DBT or, I'm trained in a lot of trauma modalities too, like it's internal parts work. It has all of that in it. And most modalities don't take you through all the safety and stability skills, then the narrative skills, then the time reversing trauma and satisfying unmet needs and boundary skills, and then the integration skills of forgiveness and learning how to live a new way, and participating with God in your restoration. And then into surveying and identifying your life purpose. I have my tools for doing that. And then launching into your life purpose. So it literally starts out with safety and nervous system stability skills, takes you through the change process, and then rebuilds you and launches you into your life purpose. So it's so unique, and it's written so that it can be brought into groups of women. So I have group questions as well as individual questions, and so it can be facilitated. And the facilitator just doesn't need to feel like they need to counsel. All they need to do is let people share their experience, strength, and hope, and keep things focused on Jesus and keep things moving. It develops so many safety and stability skills at the beginning that by the time you get to the middle and you're going slowly through it, because with trauma work sometimes less is more, that it's doable. And we've done this in groups over COVID. There were coaches that went through it in groups online, and so we've already kind of proven the concept.
This is unique. And one of the things that I'm seeing in your list of quotes from this project is, where it is hysterical, it is also historical. Can you explain that?
Yes. I didn't create the saying, but it's super good. So I forget who said it first, but I'm going to give a story from my own life. When I was a brand new Christian, I was maybe 19 or 20. I was living with a roommate, and she had a fiance and a child. The fiance didn't live with us. They had a child together, but they were trying to do things right and not living together. And anyway, so they were decorating for Christmas, and I came out, and we're talking about Christmas now, so Christmas trigger. And I came out, and I was hysterical. I was so mad that they were decorating for Christmas without me. It was a complete hysterical reaction. Now, your reaction, listener, might not be that hysterical. I actually was hysterical. why did I overreact so much? Why? So I went to a friend, a mentor's house, and I was crying, crying, crying. She's like, there's something else under this. There's something else under this. And finally out came out how I used to feel so neglected and abandoned by my mother, who would do things with my stepfather and my brother and leave me out. And so I was triggered. It was hysterical because it was historical. It was a place that wasn't healed. Well, for most of us, it's not quite that dramatic. I was kind of stark raving saved and had come out of a lot of trauma. But for a lot of us, it's more like where your husband is upset and won't talk, and you can't stop pursuing and going after him, and you behave in ways where you're like, what is wrong with me, right? And so and then there is something going on where it's hysterical, it's historical. So there's an overreaction because there's a wound underneath it that is not healed. And those are the places where we really want to let the Lord in and really work. And we know because later on or the next day we wake up and we're like, why did I act that way? Of course he needed space. It's fine. Why didn't I give him space? It's because in that moment, maybe that fear of rejection or abandonment from middle school or a previous marriage or your father is coming up in that moment. And it just is taking us into a different place emotionally that is an overreaction to the circumstance.
Yeah, it's like a wound under the surface. So if someone
Mm-hmm.
lightly touches it, you're not just
Yeah,
reacting to the current pressure, you're reacting to the wound that wasn't treated before.
well said.
So, yeah, so this is a really great concept. And I know that people are going to want to stay connected with you and get more
Mm-hmm.
information about it. But before we get to that and all your links, is there one last word of hope and encouragement that you would like to offer those who are listening? Something that would encourage them during a season when they feel frantic? Maybe they're looking at being on the brink of hysterical because they're
Mm-hmm.
facing some potential trauma triggers this holiday season.
Yeah. I would love to just take a moment to talk about the vast, endless grace of God. There's no place where you're going to be where God won't be there and where he won't meet you. He shows up. My dad died by suicide. I've had a child die. I've had unwanted divorce. I've had, and then I had the things before I was a Christian. He was there. He's always there. And we might not feel like he's there, but we definitely want to take some time, settle down, just Jesus, where are you? Or Holy Spirit or Father or Lord or whatever feels most comfortable for you to say. Because when we're working with safety, we really need to say it in a way we can feel good, safe. And so, Jesus, where are you right now? What are you saying right now? Encounter, like, I'm right here and I'm hurting. Speak to me. He will show up. He will show up. And so and then the other piece is kind of where we started. And you also need to take that strength you've gotten from him and show up for you too. As long as he's inside of you being like, sweet girl, I got you. It's okay. And you're like, and you're not doing the same thing to you, you're not going to be one and have that wholeness. So we need to also, sweet baby girl, it's okay. I won't leave you. I'm with you. God's with you. Me and God are an army taking care of you, and just talk to those child parts. And I know that someone is saying, I will not do that, but I want to challenge you to try it. It feels super good. Why does it feel good? Because we need it. We need it. It's because we're not validated. Often we're not validated enough growing up. And so we just haven't developed, that kind of gestalt, the kind of sense of what God wanted to be imparted to us when we were little. And the enemy tries to mess with us too, even if we had good parents.
I love the fact that you are bringing up the fact that God makes us as redeemed people made new, that there is hope for a rejuvenation of the soul, mind, body, and spirit, that we are not stuck in our patterns. There are some circles of
Mm-hmm.
psychology that say, once you're this, you're always this, and they define
Mm-hmm.
us by what has happened to us. But this is very much a healing approach. And I love how
Yeah.
comprehensive this is and integrative the science and the faith pieces are
Mm-hmm.
in your work. So now tell us how people can get a copy of your book and stay connected with all of your resources and wonderful research.
Yes. So I haven't had a lot going on with my ministry lately. I'm kind of relaunching it with with the book. I've been focusing on my clinical work. So you can find Heart Journey and the accompanying journal and get them both because the journal takes you through the work that you're going to need to do at Amazon and all the places books are sold. It's out on Audible as well. And if you want the book in Kindle, and if you want the book copy, there are QR codes in there where you can get some guided meditations with me and encounters with the Lord in my voice. And you can follow me at drbarbaraministries.org. And also for those who are interested in trauma intensives, you can email me through my website. And I would then kind of, if you want to, some people fly in or drive in and do 2 or 3 day trauma intensives with me. I love doing that kind of deep trauma work. That would be through my clinical practice, but I can do that as well. So drbarbaraministries.org. And I have some freebies there if you want to scroll down and get some freebie short reads.
I hope that all of you listening will access Dr. Barbara's wealth of well-researched, amazing materials and services, and get in touch with her for yourself or for those that you love who may be suffering through some trauma triggers this season or in seasons to come, perhaps. And of course, I also hope that you hit subscribe and come back for the next episode of Flourish-Meant. Flourish-Meant is part of the Spark Media Network and can be found on the Edify app.